In this episode, we're going to talk about trapping, what it is, and how to avoid it in your coloring workflow. But before we go too far, we need to first talk about printing in general, and then specific printing techniques for comics. When we print in more than one color, the printers on press lay down color one at a time. The press itself is huge. It's almost a block long with stations or inkers that consist of a bunch of rollers and appropriate inks. And as the paper is fed through the machine, each inker is guiding the paper through using the rollers and applying the ink that it has been set up with. So if you're printing in CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, each bank or inker will be set up with each color, and the paper will travel through, getting a hit of cyan, then a hit of magenta, and then a hit of yellow, and then finally a hit of black in the last inker. For most print jobs, a multicolor project will be CMYK, and with that, the files are set up in that color space in your software of choice. And when an image is set up in CMYK, the art is overall pretty much using all four colors. Even the parts of an image that are black are using a combination of black and a percentage of cyan, magenta, and or yellow. When you have a black that uses multiple inks, we call that a rich black. Now in comics, we have a couple printing techniques that play with the inks themselves on press: limited color and bitmap inks. For a limited color project, we are usually printing in 2 or 3 inks. And instead of printing the book in CMYK, we are using specific colors. For example, a black ink and a green ink. Or for a 3-color project, a black ink, a blue ink, and a pink ink. So for bitmap inks, this technique isolates the inks at an abnormally high resolution to achieve a very smooth and crisp printing result, and it's saved in a bitmap format. But this means that the inks are printed using only one color, usually a black. Bitmap inks are not using multiple inks and can never be a rich black. Check out my other videos in this series on how to set up your files for limited color and bitmap ink printing. Now let's talk about trapping. Trapping refers to an overlapping of colors to compensate for misregistration. Trapping can also refer to overprinting, which I'll discuss later in the video. But first, what is misregistration? This is when the paper on a printing press shifts ever so slightly, causing the inks to misalign. When the paper shifts, you can see gaps or white spaces in the final prints if the files aren't prepared correctly. Modern printing presses have an output of 40,000 sheets an hour. It's inevitable that the paper will move when it's on press. When does misalignment show the most? In lettering text and cartooning inks. Anytime you're using spot inks flush up to another spot ink, or you have thin black details in your art that are colored using a rich black, these are the instances where you can easily see press misalignment. So in order to protect ourselves from trapping issues, strategically overlap colors behind the inks or keep elements just one ink. All of that being said, you want to be mindful of how far you overlap colors behind your inks, because remember, when you do limited color printing or set up your files with bitmap inks, in both scenarios, the inks are one color, usually black, not a rich black, which has other colors mixed in with the black ink. So if your other colors extend behind any single color, you'll see those areas appear darker, more rich if you will. This is what's called overprinting, when one color is printed over another, resulting in a combination of the two. So I've prepared a file to be printed. I'm going to open up my template project here. This art was donated for educational purposes by my son. All right. I have these two files. details here. And as you can see, I have the ink work ready to color. Now, if I were to just add the color at a glance, it should be pretty straightforward. I could take the selection tool and I can highlight the areas I want to color, and in this case I'm going to highlight the chest plates of our character. Now if I were to go and add the color, I could just go and do that here, where I would fill in the color, and at a glance that should be fine. But if there are any variances on the press, because this color was set right up to the edge of the black ink lines, if there's any variances on the press, you'll see this white line appear. That is the press misalignment that we want to avoid. So if we want to avoid this, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to backtrack a little bit here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to select my chest plates again on this character. But what I'm going to do is come to the top of the page here, and I'm going to hit select, modify, and expand. Now here you will be prompted with a pop-up, and you're going to be asked to enter in a value. This value is going to be how far you want to expand your selection. There is no absolute answer here, because depending on the resolution of your file, depending on the style of your ink work, that is going to affect this. But for the purposes of what I'm showing here, I'm going to put in 2 pixels. I'm going to hit OK. Now, as you can see, it has increased my selection 2 pixels, and now it is overlapping behind my ink work. So now, if I apply my color, the color is now slightly overlapping the ink work for my character. And so if I were to now replicate press misalignment, so the paper can shift on press, we won't get that white space. So we want to be intentional with our trapping. So let's say I decide that I want to add some color to the bottom of my character's shoes here. So I can go and I can add this color here. Now if I'm painting and adding color here, and I can be, maybe I'm being a little sloppy and I don't care and it's kind of breaking out of the lines, but I'm okay with that. But then let's say like all of a sudden if you look, you can actually see it behind the black. Now this is where it looks sloppy. This is where it just doesn't make any sense. There is no creative choice here, but you can make this a creative choice. You can take advantage of this. This is overprinting. This is a situation where you have a second color printing along with the black, and now you're starting to get a rich black. You're getting a black with multiple inks. So one could take advantage of this maybe it's a reflection or a shadow, or maybe it's a situation where you want to create like some textures into the ground. So the key is being intentional with how you're playing with your overprinting. It does create an opportunity to play around with the interaction of these two inks. Now, the other instance to keep in mind is making sure that things are one color. So I'm going to open up my CMYK version, and I'm going to show you why we don't do our text in a rich black. So let's say, actually really this whole frame right here is a really great example. You know, we have the thin line for our speech bubble, and then we have the thin line work for our text. So the reason why we want to not have thin elements that are colored using a rich black or multiple inks is because if there are misalignments on press, or there's variances on press, any movement is you're going to see the colors. So for example, here, if I were to just, this is the kind of thing that you would see if you tried to print this using a rich black. You can start getting this sort of haloing effect between the two colors. That's why we want to keep these strictly a black ink. So if I were to turn off the cyan, turn off the magenta, and turn off the yellow, you'll get the same effect that you wanted before, but you don't have to worry about getting the weird haloing and misalignment. The takeaway here is when you're working with limited color projects or bitmap inks, you just want to make sure you're trapping your colors while you work. That's the takeaway. Overlap the tones behind the blacks just a little bit so you don't get those white spots that look like mistakes. Don't have small, thin elements as a rich black, and be intentional about your trapping, because you can use this tool as a way to add texture. All right, that's about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around.